The sound came through the radio at 2:47 in the afternoon. Not a scream, worse than that. A child crying, muffled, desperate. Then silence. Sergeant Thomas Wright stopped mid-stride on platform 3 at King's Cross Station. The royal train sat 30 meters away, polished burgundy carriages gleaming in the autumn sunlight, empty, scheduled to depart in 18 minutes. The platform had been cleared 20 minutes ago. No one should be near that train, especially not a crying child. He pressed his radio. "Control, this is Wright. Did you catch that transmission?" "Static, then." "Negative, Sergeant." "What transmission?" Wright's jaw tightened. The sound had come through his personal radio, not the main channel, which meant it came from inside the train itself, from one of the emergency intercoms that connected every carriage to the security detail. Someone had pressed that button, someone small enough to sound like that. But before we continue, make sure you hit subscribe on Crown Watch. Drop a comment below where you're watching from. Now, back to what happened next. Wright started walking toward the train. His boots echoed across the empty platform. Years of military service had taught him to trust his instincts. Right now, every instinct screamed that something was very wrong. The royal train consisted of 9 carriages, sleeping quarters, dining car, conference room, staff accommodation. Wright had walked this train dozens of times during security sweeps. He knew every door, every lock, every emergency exit. The intercom system had buttons in each carriage, installed after a security review 3 years ago. Press it, and you reached whoever was on duty. The system was simple, reliable, and right now, it was telling him a child was somewhere on that train. He reached the first carriage. The door was locked, standard procedure. The train wouldn't be unlocked until the royal family arrived in 15 minutes. Wright pulled out his access card and swiped it. Nothing. He tried again. The lock stayed red. His radio crackled. "Wright, this is Control. You're showing movement near the train. Confirm your position. Platform 3. I need access to the carriages. Now." A pause. "Sergeant, the train is sealed for departure. No entry until the family arrives. I have reason to believe someone's inside." "That's not possible. The train was cleared and locked 30 minutes ago. Full sweep completed." Wright looked up at the windows. Burgundy curtains drawn in every carriage. No movement, no shadows. But that crying, he'd heard it, as clear as his own breathing. "Control, I'm requesting immediate access. Override the locks." Another pause, longer this time. "Stand by." Wright didn't stand by. He moved along the platform, checking each carriage door, all locked, all showing red lights. He reached the 4th carriage, the one used primarily for private family quarters. Something made him stop. Not a sound this time, just a feeling. The kind soldiers learn to respect when their lives depend on it. He looked closer at the door. Fresh scratches around the handle. Small, recent. The kind of marks that come from someone trying to open a lock from the inside without the right tools. His radio crackled again. "Right, access denied. The trainmaster reports no irregularities. Return to your position. There are scratch marks on carriage 4. Someone tried to force this door. Sergeant, I need you to step away from the train. That's a direct order." Wright stood there, hand on the door handle. 20 seconds to decide. Follow orders and return to position. Or trust what he'd heard. Trust those scratches. Trust the crawling sensation at the back of his neck that said a child was in trouble. He made his choice. "Control, I'm entering the train. Log it as my decision." "Sergeant, if you breach that door without authorization..." Wright pulled out his emergency override key. Every Royal Protection Officer carried one. Red plastic casing. Only to be used in genuine emergencies. Using it without proper cause meant disciplinary action, possibly dismissal. He slid the key into the panel beside the door, turned it 90 degrees. The lock clicked from red to amber. The door opened. The interior was dark, curtains drawn. Wright stepped inside, letting his eyes adjust. The carriage smelled of leather and polish. Expensive wood paneling lined the walls. Thick carpet muffled his footsteps, everything in its place, everything perfect. Too perfect. Wright moved through the carriage slowly. The first section was a sitting area, 2 sofas facing each other, coffee table between them. A newspaper lay folded on one sofa. Today's edition. Someone had been here recently. He continued forward. The carriage was divided into sections by sliding doors, all closed, all dark. He opened the first door, a sleeping compartment, bed made, luggage racks empty, nothing. Second door, another sleeping compartment, this one larger, royal crest embroidered on the pillow, fresh flowers in a vase on the bedside table. Someone had prepared this room today, but no one was here now. Wright paused, listened. The train was silent, except for the ambient hum of the power system. He was about to move to the third door when he heard it, not through the radio this time, directly ahead, through the wall. A sniffle, small, trying to be quiet. Someone was in the next compartment. Wright approached the third door. This one was different, a lock on the outside, the kind designed to secure a room, keep someone out, or keep someone in. The lock was engaged. His hand went to the handle. "This is Sergeant Wright, Royal Protection. I'm coming in." No response, but another sound, shuffling, like someone trying to hide. Wright pulled his override key again. The lock on this door was older, mechanical. He worked the key carefully. It took 15 seconds. Then the bolt slid back with a heavy clunk. He opened the door. The compartment was small, a storage area, not meant for passengers. Boxes stacked along one wall, cleaning supplies, extra linens. And in the far corner, wedged between two boxes, partially hidden by a stack of pillows, was a small boy in a school uniform. Prince Louis looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. Wright's training kicked in immediately. Assess the situation. Check for injuries. Secure the child. But his mind was racing ahead. Louis should have been at school, should have been nowhere near this train, and he definitely shouldn't have been locked in a storage compartment. "Your Royal Highness," Wright said, keeping his voice calm. "Are you hurt?" Louis shook his head. Tears streamed down his face, but he was trying to control them, trying to be brave. That detail hit Wright harder than anything else. This small boy, crying alone in a locked room, still trying to maintain composure. Wright moved forward slowly. He'd done enough hostage recovery to know you don't rush a frightened child. "It's okay. You're safe now. Can you tell me what happened?" Louis opened his mouth, closed it. His hands were shaking. He pulled them into his lap, trying to hide it. Wright crouched down to the boy's level. "How long have you been in here?" "I don't know." Louis's voice came out small and hoarse, like he'd been crying for a while. "She said I had to wait here. She said she'd come back, but she didn't." "Who said that?" Louis hesitated. That hesitation told Wright everything. The boy was scared, not just of being locked in, scared of what would happen if he told the truth. "Your Royal Highness, I need you to tell me who brought you here." Before Louis could answer, Wright's radio exploded with noise. Multiple voices, urgent, overlapping. "All units, the royal family has arrived early. Repeat, family arriving now. Wright, what's your position? Report immediately." "We have a situation on platform 3. Someone breached the train." Wright pressed his radio. "This is Wright. I'm inside carriage 4. I've found Prince Louis. He's safe, but he needs immediate medical attention." Silence, then chaos. "Say again. Did you say Prince Louis?" "Confirmed. The prince was locked in a storage compartment. Alone. More voices, more confusion. Then a new voice cut through. Calm, authoritative. Wright recognized it immediately. Captain Wells, his commanding officer. "Wright, secure the prince and exit the train immediately. We're coming to you." Wright looked at Louis. "Can you stand?" Louis nodded. He got to his feet slowly, unsteady. Wright noticed his uniform was wrinkled, dirt on his knees. How long had he been sitting on that floor? Wright thought he knew what questions to ask. He was wrong. What Louis was about to reveal would turn this from a security incident into something much darker. He helped Louis toward the door. The boy moved slowly, one hand braced against the wall. Wright kept himself between Louis and the rest of the carriage. Basic protection instinct, shield the principal. Get them to safety. Ask questions later. They moved through the sleeping compartments, through the sitting area, toward the carriage door. Wright could hear voices outside now, running footsteps on the platform. In 30 seconds, this train would be swarming with security personnel. In 60 seconds, questions would start, questions Wright didn't have good answers for yet. He needed those answers before anyone else arrived. At the carriage door, Wright stopped, turned to Louis. "Your Royal Highness, Before we go out there, I need you to tell me the truth. Who locked you in that room? Louis looked at his feet. His bottom lip trembled. I know you're scared, Wright said quietly. But whatever happened, it wasn't your fault. You're not in trouble. I promise. But I need to know who did this. Louis took a shaky breath. When he spoke, his voice barely rose above a whisper. Mrs. Richardson. She's on grandmother's staff. She said I was being difficult. She said I needed time to think about my behavior. Wright's chest tightened. What behavior? I asked where we were going. She said it wasn't my concern. I said, Mummy always tells me where we're going. She got angry. She brought me onto the train and told me to wait in that room. She locked the door. She said she'd let me out when I learned to be quiet. The door opened before Wright could respond. Captain Wells stood on the platform, 3 other guards behind him. Wells's expression was unreadable, but his eyes went immediately to Louis. Your Royal Highness, Wells said, his voice careful. Are you all right? Louis nodded, but his hand gripped Wright's sleeve. Wells looked at Wright. What happened? Wright gave the short version. The crying on the radio, the locked door, finding Louis in the storage compartment. As he spoke, he watched Wells's face, saw the moment disbelief turn to cold anger. Where is Mrs. Richardson now? Wells asked. I don't know, sir. But Prince Louis says she's the one who locked him in. Wells pulled out his radio. All units, locate Mrs. Richardson immediately. She's to be detained for questioning. He looked at Wright. Stay with the prince. Don't let him out of your sight. Footsteps echoed across the platform. Fast, urgent. Wright turned and saw Princess Kate running toward them. No security detail, no announcement. Just a mother who'd been told her son was found locked on a train. Louis saw her, and the composure broke. He ran to her. Kate dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him, her face pressed against his hair. She was saying something Wright couldn't hear. Louis was crying again, but different now, relief. Prince William arrived seconds later, slightly behind Kate. His face was white. What happened? Wells started to explain, but Kate looked up sharply. Where is she? We're locating her now, Your Royal Highness. Find her, Kate said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the platform. Find her right now. If this story is showing you something you didn't expect, drop a like and let us know in the comments. How would you have handled this situation? Now, here's what happened when they found Mrs. Richardson. Wright stayed with Louis while Kate and William spoke to Captain Wells. He watched the boy lean against his mother, small and exhausted. Louis kept glancing at the train like he expected to be dragged back inside. That fear in his eyes, that hypervigilance. Wright had seen it before in soldiers after combat, in hostages after rescue. A child shouldn't look like that. Wright's radio crackled. We've located Mrs. Richardson. She's in the station main hall, attempting to leave the premises. Wells spoke into his own radio. Detain her. I'm coming now. He looked at Wright. With me. Wright glanced at Louis. The boy had both arms wrapped around Kate now. She met Wright's eyes over Louis's head and nodded once. Permission, or maybe gratitude, hard to tell. Wright followed Wells across the platform and into the station. King's Cross at mid-afternoon was busy, travellers everywhere, shops and cafes bustling. No one noticed the 2 guards moving swiftly through the crowd. Training kept Wright's face neutral, professional. Inside, his blood was boiling. They found Mrs. Richardson near the ticket machines. 2 guards had her cornered. She was a woman in her late 50s, silver hair pulled back severely, wearing a grey suit that screamed palace staff. When she saw Wells and Wright approaching, her expression shifted from indignation to something more calculating. Captain Wells, she said, her voice tight, this is highly irregular. Your men have physically prevented me from leaving. I have duties to attend to. Wells stopped 3 feet from her. Where were you in the last hour? I don't see how that's relevant. Answer the question. Mrs. Richardson's jaw clenched. I was overseeing preparations for Her Majesty's arrival, as I do every time the royal train is in use. Now, if you'll excuse me, you locked Prince Louis in a storage compartment on that train. The words hung in the air. Around them, travellers kept moving. Oblivious, Mrs. Richardson's face went carefully blank. I have no idea what you're talking about. The prince has identified you by name. Then the prince is mistaken. Her voice was ice. Children often misremember things when they're upset. Perhaps you should focus on how a royal child ended up on a secure train, unsupervised, rather than making accusations against loyal staff. Wright stepped forward. You're saying Prince Louis imagined being locked in a room? Mrs. Richardson looked at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. I'm saying I would never do such a thing, and I resent the implication. She turned back to Wells. I assume I'm free to go? No, Wells said flatly. You're being detained pending investigation. You'll surrender your palace credentials and access cards. You'll be escorted from the premises. And you'll make yourself available for formal questioning within the next 24 hours. Colour rose in Mrs. Richardson's cheeks. On whose authority? Mine. And you can escalate to anyone you like. The facts won't change. This is outrageous. Do you have any idea who I work for? I know exactly who you work for. And when she hears what you did to her grandson, you'll be lucky if detention is the worst thing that happens to you. Something shifted in Mrs. Richardson's expression. Not quite fear, but close. The calculating look returned. There's been a misunderstanding. The child was upset. I simply suggested he take a moment to calm down before the journey. If he somehow became locked in, that was certainly accidental. Funny how that story changed in 30 seconds, Wright said. Mrs. Richardson shot him a venomous look. I don't answer to subordinates. You'll answer to the police, Wells said. Sergeant Wright, escort Mrs. Richardson to holding. I'll inform Her Majesty personally. As Wright moved to comply, Mrs. Richardson's composure cracked slightly. This is a mistake. I've served the royal family for 23 years. I've never had a complaint. Not one. You're ending my career over a child's tantrum. Wright stopped, looked at her. He was crying so hard he couldn't breathe. He thought you'd forgotten him. He's 6 years old. He's 7, and he needs to learn discipline. Not from you, Wells said. Not anymore. Take her. Wright escorted Mrs. Richardson back through the station. She walked with her head high, projecting dignity, but her hands shook slightly. Caught, trying to salvage what couldn't be salvaged. They reached the security office near Platform 9. Wright handed her over to 2 more guards and returned to the royal train. The scene had changed in his absence. More security now, a police presence, medical personnel checking Louis. Wright could see the boy sitting on a bench with a female paramedic, Kate beside him. William stood nearby, speaking rapidly into his phone. His expression suggested whoever was on the other end was getting the full force of royal displeasure. Wells appeared at Wright's shoulder. The prince is physically fine, dehydrated, shaken, but no injuries. How long was he in there? Based on school records, he was picked up at 1:15 by palace transport. Standard procedure for early dismissal. He should have been brought directly to Kensington Palace. Instead, Mrs. Richardson diverted the car here. Security footage shows her bringing Louis onto the train at 1:40. She locked him in that compartment at 1:45. You found him at 2:53. Over an hour. Wright's hands clenched. Why? We're piecing that together. Initial investigation suggests Louis asked too many questions during the car ride. Where they were going, why he wasn't going home. Mrs. Richardson considered it disrespectful. She decided he needed to learn to be quiet. She punished a royal child by locking him on a train. Yes. Did anyone else know? Wells hesitated. That's the question we're trying to answer. Mrs. Richardson was acting on Queen Camilla's behalf. The train was preparing for a private journey to Scotland. But there's no indication Camilla ordered or knew about Louis being locked up. Mrs. Richardson appears to have acted independently. Wright watched Louis across the platform. The boy was drinking water now, colour returning to his face. Kate's arm around his shoulders. He was terrified. I know. If I hadn't heard that transmission. But you did, Wells said. And you acted. Even when control ordered you to stand down. Wright turned to face his commanding officer. Am I in trouble? Wells looked at him for a long moment. You breached a secured royal transport without authorization. You violated direct orders. You used an emergency override key inappropriately. He paused. You also saved a child from a situation that could have escalated into something much worse. The train was scheduled to depart in 15 minutes. With the doors locked and soundproofed, no one would have heard him crying once the engine started. We might not have found him until arrival in Scotland, 7 hours later. 7 hours. Alone. In the dark. thinking he'd been abandoned. Wright didn't know it yet, but his decision to open that door was about to change everything. Not just for him, not just for Mrs. Richardson, for how royal security handled every child in the family going forward. William finished his phone call and walked over. Up close, Wright could see the tension in his jaw, the barely controlled fury in his eyes. "Sergeant Wright, sir, Kate and I want to thank you personally. What you did today." William stopped, took a breath. "Our son was in danger. You trusted your instincts and you got him out. Whatever the protocol says, you made the right choice." "I was just doing my job, sir." "No," William said quietly. "You were doing more than that. Most people would have waited for authorization. You didn't. That matters." Kate stood and approached them, Louis still holding her hand. The boy looked small next to the adults, vulnerable. Kate met Wright's eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. But the weight behind those two words made Wright's throat tight. Louis looked up at him. "You heard me on the radio?" "I did. I didn't know if anyone would. The button was really high up. I had to climb on a box." Wright crouched down. "You did exactly the right thing. Pressing that button was very smart. I was scared." "I know, but you're safe now, and that woman is never going to be near you again. I promise." Louis nodded slowly. Then, without warning, he hugged Wright. Quick, fierce. A child's gratitude with no pretense or protocol. Just relief. When Louis stepped back, Kate mouthed another, "Thank you," and led him toward the waiting cars. William lingered. "Captain Wells will handle the formal investigation, but understand something, Sergeant. This incident revealed serious security gaps. We need to know how a staff member could divert a royal child without anyone noticing, how she could access a secured train, how she thought this was acceptable behavior." His voice hardened. "Someone failed today. Multiple someones. You weren't one of them." William left. Wells turned to Wright. "You'll need to give a full statement. Everything from the moment you heard the transmission. Every detail." "Yes, sir." "And Wright? Off the record?" Wells's expression softened slightly. "I'm glad you didn't wait for my authorization. If you had, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Stay with us, because what happened in the investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Here's what they found." The formal inquiry began the next morning. Wright spent 3 hours in a conference room at St. James's Palace, recounting every second of the previous day. 2 investigators from Royal Protection Command, 1 from the Metropolitan Police, all taking notes, all asking the same questions from different angles. "When you heard the crying, why didn't you wait for proper authorization?" "Because children don't have time for proper authorization when they're in danger." "How did you know it was Prince Louis specifically?" "I didn't. Not until I opened that door. But I knew it was a child. That was enough." "Were you aware Mrs. Richardson had been working for the royal family for over 2 decades?" "I was aware that didn't give her the right to lock a child in a storage room." The lead investigator, Inspector Sarah Chen, studied him across the table. "You've received complaints from other staff. They say you were aggressive, insubordinate, that you refused to follow protocol." "I followed the protocol that matters. Protect the principal." "In this case, the principal was a 7-year-old boy who needed help." Chen made a note. "Tell me about Mrs. Richardson's reaction when you confronted her." Wright went through it again. The initial denial, the shift to dismissal, the claim that Louis was simply being disciplined, that final comment about him needing to learn to be quiet. "She never showed remorse," Wright said. "Even when she knew she was caught, she treated it like a minor inconvenience. Like Louis was the problem, not her." "Did she mention Queen Camilla at all?" "No. Captain Wells told me Mrs. Richardson was working on Camilla's behalf, but Richardson never invoked her name. Not once." Chen exchanged glances with her colleagues. "We need to show you something." She opened a laptop and turned it toward Wright. Security footage, black and white. The interior of the royal train's 4th carriage. Wright watched Mrs. Richardson lead Louis through the carriage. The timestamp read 1344. Louis was asking questions. You could see his mouth moving even without sound. Mrs. Richardson ignored him. She opened the storage compartment door, said something brief. Louis's face crumpled. He backed away. She grabbed his arm, not gently, pushed him inside, closed the door, locked it. The video continued. Mrs. Richardson checked her watch. smoothed her hair, walked away, calm, unhurried, like she'd just completed a routine task. Wright's jaw clenched. How long until someone reported him missing? That's the disturbing part, Chen said. No one did. The palace believed Louis was at school all afternoon. The school believed he'd been picked up for a family matter. The transport driver who brought him from school logged him as delivered to palace staff. But that staff member was Mrs. Richardson, and she never logged his arrival or location. So he just disappeared into a gap in the system. Exactly. If you hadn't heard that transmission, Louis would have been on that train when it departed, locked in that room. The train was scheduled to travel 7 hours to Scotland without stops. The storage compartment isn't checked during journey. It's not even on the normal patrol route. Wright felt cold. He would have been alone for 7 hours. Minimum. The train was scheduled to sit in Scotland overnight. Staff don't access storage until the following morning. Louis could have been locked in there for nearly 24 hours before anyone found him. 24 hours. No food, no water, no bathroom. A child alone in the dark, thinking he'd been forgotten. Or worse, thinking he'd been abandoned on purpose as punishment. Why would she do this? Wright asked. Chen pulled out another document. We interviewed Mrs. Richardson extensively. Her story kept changing. Initially, she claimed she never took Louis onto the train. Security footage proved that wrong. Then she said it was a brief timeout, and she intended to retrieve him before departure. But she made no attempt to return to the train after locking him in. She was found trying to leave the station entirely. So what's the truth? The truth is disturbing. Mrs. Richardson has worked for Queen Camilla for 8 years. She's been described as intensely loyal, protective, sometimes overprotective. We found emails from the past year where she expressed concern about the Cambridge children's behavior. Quote, they show insufficient respect for hierarchy. Their parents allow too much informality. End quote. Wright leaned back. She thought she was correcting that. More than that, she thought she was acting in the family's best interest. In her mind, Louis asking questions in the car was disrespectful, challenging authority. She saw an opportunity to teach him a lesson about proper behavior, about knowing his place. His place. He's 7 years old. He's literally royalty. Yes. But in Mrs. Richardson's worldview, children should be seen and not heard, especially when staff is present. She's from a generation where that was the standard. She applied that standard to a royal child, without considering the consequences. Another investigator, Detective Inspector David Pierce, spoke up. Here's what makes this more serious. We found a pattern. Over the past 3 years, there have been 6 complaints from palace staff about Mrs. Richardson's treatment of junior staff and younger family members. Nothing actionable. Just comments that she was too strict, too rigid, overly critical of informal behavior. Were those complaints investigated? Superficially. But Mrs. Richardson had seniority. She had Camilla's trust. The complaints were dismissed as personality conflicts. Chen closed the laptop. The system failed, Sergeant Wright. Multiple times. Warning signs were ignored. Normal security protocols weren't followed. A staff member had too much unsupervised access to a royal child. And when that child ended up in danger, the only reason he was found was because you refused to follow orders. Wright processed that. What happens to her now? She's been terminated. Banned from all royal properties. The police are considering charges for child endangerment and false imprisonment. But prosecution is complicated. The royal family doesn't want this public. Louis is a child. He deserves privacy. So she might walk away? That's not our decision. But criminal or not, her career is over. She'll never work in royal service again. And the recommendations from this investigation will change how we handle security for all the children. The interview continued for another hour. More questions, more details. Finally, Chen closed her notebook. That's everything we need for now. You'll receive a copy of the report. Officially, you'll be commended for your actions. The breach of protocol will be noted, but no disciplinary action will be taken. And unofficially? Chen almost smiled. Unofficially, you did what needed doing. Don't lose that instinct. Wright left the palace and returned to duty the next morning. Everything looked normal. Same post, same uniform, same routine. But something had shifted. Other guards looked at him differently. some with respect, some with wariness. He'd broken protocol and been proven right. That made him either a hero or a liability, depending on who you asked. 3 days after the incident, Wright was summoned to a private meeting. No details, just a time and location. Clarence House. He arrived in dress uniform, uncertain what to expect. A private secretary led him to a small sitting room. Princess Anne was waiting. Wright stood at attention. "Your Royal Highness." Anne gestured to a chair. "Sit. This isn't formal." He sat. Anne studied him with the direct gaze she was known for. No pretense, no diplomatic softness. "You're the sergeant who found my nephew," she said. "Yes, ma'am. I've read the reports, all of them. Security's version, the police investigation, the witness statements." Anne leaned forward slightly. "Now I want to hear your version. Not what you wrote in the official report. What actually happened," Wright told her. The crying on the radio, the decision to breach the door, finding Louis, the confrontation with Mrs. Richardson. He left nothing out. When he finished, Anne was quiet for a moment. "You disobeyed orders." "Yes, ma'am." "You used emergency override without proper authorization." "Yes, ma'am." "You potentially compromised the train's security." "Yes, ma'am." Anne nodded slowly. "Good." Wright blinked. "Ma'am?" "Protocol exists for a reason, Sergeant. But protocol isn't perfect. Sometimes situations arise that no manual anticipated. In those moments, the officer on the ground needs to make a judgment call. You made yours." "You were right." Anne stood. Wright stood immediately. "Louis is fine, by the way. Physically. Emotionally, it will take time. But Kate and William are handling it. They wanted me to convey their thanks personally. Not the official thanks you received, the real thing. It was my duty, ma'am. It was more than duty. Duty would have been waiting for authorization. What you did was called giving a damn." Anne moved toward the window. "The palace is reviewing security procedures for all the children. New protocols, redundant tracking. No single staff member will have unsupervised access. Mrs. Richardson revealed a vulnerability. We're fixing it. Has there been any contact from Queen Camilla regarding the incident?" Anne's expression became carefully neutral. "Camilla has been informed. She's devastated, naturally. Mrs. Richardson acted without authority or instruction, but it happened on her watch, with her staff. That's a failure of oversight." Wright chose his next words carefully. "Will there be consequences for that failure?" "That's being handled privately. But understand something, Sergeant. This family protects its own, especially its children. When that protection fails, there are consequences. They may not be public, but they're real." Anne turned back to him. "You'll return to duty. Your record will note your commendation. The breach of protocol will be expunged, and you have my personal recognition. If you ever need anything at all, you have a direct line to my office." She handed him a card. Simple white cardstock. No title, just a phone number. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me. You earned it." Anne paused at the door. "One more thing. Louis asked about you. He wanted to know if you were in trouble. Kate told him you were fine, but he insisted on knowing. He's worried about you, Sergeant, because in his mind, you're the person who came when no one else did. Remember that. Remember that what you did mattered to him. Children don't forget the people who help them when they're scared." Anne left. Wright stood alone in the sitting room, holding that card, direct line to Princess Anne. Not many people had that. We're approaching the final part of this story. What happened in the weeks that followed changed more than just security protocols. Here's what really changed. 6 weeks after the incident, Wright was back on standard duty, platform security, event coverage, the usual rotation. But his reputation had preceded him. Other guards treated him differently now, some with respect, others with barely concealed resentment. He'd broken the rules and been rewarded. That didn't sit well with everyone. Captain Wells called him in one morning. "I have a request from Kensington Palace, specifically from Princess Kate." Wright waited. "They're assembling a new security team dedicated solely to the Cambridge children, enhanced protocols, more oversight. The team will have final authority on all security decisions regarding George, Charlotte, and Louis. No exceptions, no staff overrides." Wells paused. "Kate wants you on that team." "Why me?" "Because when her son was in danger, you acted. Everyone else followed protocol. You followed your instincts. She wants people like that protecting her children. Wright considered it. A dedicated team meant higher profile, more responsibility, also more scrutiny. Every decision questioned, every action reviewed. What would my role be? Senior protection officer. You'd rotate through all three children. Primary focus on Louis, given your history. But you'd be trained across all three. What about my current assignment? You'd be reassigned permanently. This is a promotion, right? Higher pay grade, better benefits, and direct reporting to William and Kate's head of security. What's the downside? Wells smiled slightly. The downside is you'd be protecting the future of the monarchy, children who will grow up in public, who are already targets for every crazy person with a grudge. You'd be responsible for keeping them safe in an increasingly dangerous world. He leaned back. No pressure. Wright took the job. The training was intensive. 2 months of specialized courses, child psychology, threat assessment, medical emergency response. He learned how children communicate danger, how they hide fear, how trauma manifests differently at different ages. He learned to read body language, to spot signs of distress that adults might miss, to think like someone who might target a child. The training also covered something unexpected, dealing with family dynamics, how to maintain security without being invasive, how to protect without smothering, how to recognize when a child needs help but can't ask for it. Children in the public eye learn to perform, the instructor said. They smile for cameras, they wave, they do what's expected, but underneath, they're still children, still vulnerable. Your job is to see past the performance, to recognize when something's wrong even when they're trying to hide it. Wright thought about Louis in that storage compartment, trying to be brave, trying not to cry. How long had he done that before Wright found him? He reported for his new assignment on a cold January morning. Kensington Palace, the Cambridge family's primary residence. He was met by Detective Inspector Sarah Chen, now head of the Enhanced Protection Team. "Welcome to the new normal," Chen said. "We have 15 officers dedicated to the children's security, 5 for each child, rotating shifts, redundant coverage, and one simple rule. If something feels wrong, you speak up immediately. No waiting, no wondering if you're overreacting. Trust your instincts. That's why you're here." The first week was adjustment. Wright learned the family's routines, school schedules, extracurricular activities, social events. He learned which staff members were permanent, which were temporary, who had direct access to the children and who didn't. Every person was vetted, every interaction logged. He saw Louis several times that first week. The boy recognized him immediately, smiled, waved, but Wright noticed something. Louis stayed close to adults he knew. He watched strangers carefully. He checked door locks, small things, easy to miss. But there. Kate noticed Wright noticing. She approached him one afternoon in the private garden. He's been like that since the incident, more cautious, more aware. His therapist says it's normal, a protective response. It should fade with time. Does he talk about what happened? Sometimes, not often. He said the worst part wasn't being locked in. It was not knowing if anyone was looking for him, if anyone cared that he was gone. Kate's voice was steady, but Wright could hear the underlying pain, a mother's pain. You ended that uncertainty. You showed him someone was looking, someone cared. That matters more than you know. 2 months into his new role, Wright was assigned to Louis's school pickup. Standard procedure now. Guard inside the school. Guard at the car. Guard monitoring the route. No gaps. No opportunities for someone to divert a royal child again. Wright waited outside the school as classes ended. Children poured out, loud, energetic. Louis emerged with 2 friends. He saw Wright and his face brightened. He said goodbye to his friends and walked over. "Sergeant Wright, did you come to get me?" "I did, Your Royal Highness." "You can call me Louis." "Everyone does." Wright smiled. "I appreciate that, but I'll stick with protocol." Louis's expression became more serious. "My mum says you're part of my security team now, because you're good at your job." "I try to be." "She says you saved me when I was on the train." Wright crouched down. Other children passed them. Teachers supervising, normal school day ending. "You saved yourself. You pressed that button. You asked for help. That took courage. Louis looked at his shoes. I was really scared. I know. Being scared doesn't mean you weren't brave. Being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared. You did that. Louis looked up. Will someone lock me up again? The question hit right, harder than expected. This was the heart of it. The lasting damage. A child who'd lost his sense of safety. No, Wright said firmly. That's not going to happen. You have new rules now. Better rules. And people like me whose only job is keeping you safe. But Louis? He waited until the boy met his eyes. If you ever feel scared, if something ever feels wrong, if anyone ever makes you uncomfortable, you tell someone. Immediately. Tell your parents. Tell your teachers. Tell me. Promise? Louis nodded. I promise. They drove back to Kensington Palace. Louis chattered about his school day. Normal kid stuff. Math class. Football practice. A book he was reading. The fear was still there, underneath. But so was resilience. Children are remarkably strong when they're given support. That evening, Wright filed his daily report. Routine day. No incidents, all procedures followed. But he added one note at the end. Prince Louis asked if someone would lock him up again. He needs continued reassurance. Recommend ongoing therapy support. Chen called him the next morning. I saw your note. Kate and William appreciate the observation. Louis has a therapy session scheduled. They'll address it. Good. Right. You're doing exactly what we need. You're not just protecting Louis physically. You're helping him feel safe. That's the real job. Keep doing it. The months passed. Spring turned to summer. Wright became a fixture in the Cambridge children's lives. Not a friend that wasn't appropriate, but a trusted presence. Someone who was just there. Reliable. Safe. Louis's anxiety gradually decreased. He started taking more risks. Laughing more. The hypervigilance faded. One afternoon, Wright watched him playing in the garden with George and Charlotte. Running. Shouting. Completely absorbed in the game. Normal. Kate stood beside Wright. He's getting better. He is. Because of you. Partially. Wright shook his head. Because of you and Prince William. Because of his siblings. Because of his therapist. I just made sure he stayed safe while he healed. That's not a small thing. Maybe it wasn't. Wright had spent years in military service. Multiple deployments overseas. He'd protected convoys, secured facilities, stood watch in hostile territories. But nothing had felt as important as this. Protecting children. Helping them feel safe in a world that sometimes wasn't. This wasn't just about stopping threats. It was about preserving innocence, about letting children be children, even when they were born into roles that made them targets, about giving them the chance to grow up without fear. A year after the train incident, Wright received a letter. Hand-delivered, royal crest on the envelope. He opened it in his quarters. It was from Louis, written in careful handwriting. Dear Sergeant Wright, thank you for helping me when I was stuck on the train. I was very scared, but you found me. Mummy says you're very good at your job. I think so too. I'm not scared anymore. Well, sometimes I'm scared, but not like before. Thank you for keeping me safe. Your friend, Louis. Friend. Wright read that word several times. Protocol said he wasn't Louis's friend. He was his protection officer. But to a child, the person who comes when you're scared, who keeps you safe, who makes you feel protected, that person is a friend. Maybe that's what mattered. Wright kept that letter, filed it carefully in his personal records, not for validation, not for pride, as a reminder of why the job mattered, why breaking protocol had been the right choice, why listening to instincts sometimes trumped following orders. Mrs. Richardson's case never went to criminal trial. The evidence was clear, the security footage damning. But the royal family declined to prosecute publicly. Too much attention, too much trauma for Louis. Instead, she received a permanent ban from royal service. Any facility, any member of the family. Forever. She lost her pension, her housing, her reputation in the tight-knit world of royal staff. She found work eventually, but far from London. Far from anyone who knew what she'd done. The palace made sure of that. No public announcement, no scandal, just quiet, absolute consequences. Queen Camilla addressed the incident privately with Kate and William. The details of that conversation never leaked, but afterward, Camilla's staff underwent comprehensive review. Anyone with regular child contact received new training, new oversight, new accountability measures. The message was clear. What happened to Louis could never happen again. Security protocols changed across the board. Every royal child now had tracking. Not invasive, not surveillance, just simple systems that ensured someone always knew where they were. Multiple people, multiple checks, no gaps for anyone to exploit. Staff access was restricted and monitored. No single person could remove a child from an authorized location without multiple confirmations. Parents were notified immediately of any deviation from normal schedule. Schools received updated procedures. The system had failed once. It wouldn't fail again. Wright continued his role with the Cambridge children for 3 more years. He watched George grow more serious, aware of his future role. He watched Charlotte develop a sharp wit and fierce protectiveness of her younger brother. He watched Louis transform from a frightened child hiding in a storage compartment to a confident boy who knew he was safe, who knew people cared, who knew that when something went wrong, someone would come. That transformation was worth everything. True duty isn't about following orders blindly. It's about understanding why the orders exist. It's about protecting the vulnerable, especially when they can't protect themselves. It's about making hard choices in impossible moments. About trusting your instincts when the manual doesn't have answers. Wright learned that lesson on a train platform when he heard a child crying, when he chose to act instead of wait, when he opened a door he wasn't authorized to open. That choice saved a child from hours of terror. It exposed a dangerous gap in security. It changed how the royal family protected their children. But more than that, it reminded everyone involved that behind the titles and protocol and procedures, there are human beings. Children who get scared, who need help, who deserve protection, not because of their position, but because they're children. Some rules are meant to be broken. Some orders are meant to be ignored. Not often, not lightly, but sometimes, when a child needs help and no one else is listening, when instinct says act and protocol says wait, when the choice is between following procedure and doing what's right. Wright made that choice. He'd make it again. If this story showed you something about duty and courage you didn't expect, make sure you're subscribed to Crown Watch. We share these untold stories from inside the palace every single day. Drop a comment. Would you have opened that door without authorization? We'll see you in the next one.